Yes, so just give me a minute. We'll wait for 2-3 minutes more so that everybody shall join. Okay. So guys, please inform to all of your friends immediately. We are going to cover very important chapter right now. Chapter number 3 from your new course, that is Audit Documentation and Audit Evidence. Obviously, 100% relevant for the old course students as well. 100% relevant for the old course students as well. So, if you are from CA Intermediate or CA IPCC, please immediately inform to all of your friends so that we'll be able to start within just next 2-3 minutes. So anybody, if you are watching the recorded one, please take forward this particular video so that your time will be saved, and this is very important chapter, so don't miss it at all. We'll try to revise at the maximum level each and every point which is very relevant for your examination perspective. Obviously, we'll try to cover the maximum coverage since this is one of the most important chapters from your entire curriculum. So we won't be keeping any scope for any of the concepts shall not be covered. So kind of that. So please try to understand. We want to cover a lot of things. We cannot see that basically this is the only important thing or this is not the important one. It's not like that, and that is the reason maybe because of this particular thing only a lot of people suffered in July 21 examination. So some questions were from such areas where usually students neglect those areas, and that's why guys, please understand this is one of the major reason of failure. Obviously, since this is the most important revision part, and that's why we are going to cover every concept in brief summarized way quickly. If you have any queries specifically, you can obviously ask in chat box and we will be discussing that all the queries as well. So don't worry about that. Okay. So I need to start. I will just wait for a minute maximum now, and then we'll start off with this session. Okay. So inform to all of your friends. Okay. So I think we should start off with this now. It has been 4 minutes now. Okay. I actually 3 minutes. Okay. No issues. So we'll start immediately with the chapter number 3. Chapter number 3 is all about two major concepts and related to that, all the related standards as well, standards on auditing. So what we are revising in this particular session is about the audit documentation and audit evidence. So in audit documentation, you guys know that essay number 230 comes into picture, while audit evidence essay number 500 comes into picture, and in this particular chapter we'll be looking at the other standards as well from the 500 series. So like 510 testing of opening balance, obviously 520 will not be covering since that is the separate chapter, analytical procedure. Next 530 we will not be covering because that is again a separate chapter for your audit sampling. 540 accounting estimates, again a different chapter. 550 related parties we will cover in this particular chapter. 560 we will cover in this chapter. 570 we will cover in this particular chapter. 580 we will cover this in this particular chapter. Are you guys clear with this? So this is how we are going to cover the entire particular chapter along with essay 230 and 500 series majority standards. I hope you guys are clear. Absolutely clear. So let's start with this super revision, super marathon for auditing chapter number 3 from new course, but completely relevant for the old course students as well. That is audit documentation and audit evidence. Let's come on. So very first thing, it is about the audit documentation. What is audit documentation? The 3 points you need to remember, that this is nothing but a record of what? Record of 3 things. Whatever the audit procedures you have performed, whatever the audit procedures you have performed based on the audit evidence obtained, relevant audit evidence obtained. So whatever the audit procedures performed, relevant audit evidence obtained, and conclusions reached by the auditor based upon audit procedures and audit evidences. Clear with this? So whatever the audit procedures have been performed by the auditor, relevant audit evidence obtained by the auditor, and conclusions reached by the auditor, the record of all these 3 things is nothing but what your audit documentation, which is also known as what your audit working papers or work papers. Clear with this? Absolutely clear. So now next thing, what is the objective and nature of this audit documentation? Why we need to provide, basically why we need to maintain the audit documentation? There are two things, and it is all about the evidence. Very important question for your examination can be from this particular ground. Evidence, that very first thing, evidence as a basis for conclusion. Obviously, if auditor have to prove on what basis the conclusion have been arrived with respect to certain account balance, class of transaction, disclosure, or overall FS level, so that will be proved based upon what your audit documentation as an audit evidence. And next evidence will be for that audit was planned and performed as per the standards on auditing, legal and other regulatory requirements. So you have the RTP question over here. Somewhere a kind of case scenario can be there on this ground where the management is blaming that auditor did not perform his duty in accordance with the standards and couldn't identify certain material misstatements or certain fraud which was identified after the audit by the management. So management is blaming that auditor has not performed his duty and he should be actually he should have contravened the provisions. So this is what the management judgment. So now if the management is talking about this, how the auditor will defend in this scenario? Very simple, guys, come on. Auditor will tell that, sir, this is not basically mandatory that auditor will be able to identify each and every material misstatement either due to fraud or error. Why? Because of the inherent limitations of audit. So due to inherent limitations of audit, you should be able to remember what are the inherent limitations. Chapter number 1. Very first, nature of financial reporting. So includes the management judgments and all. Nature of audit procedure. Sampling, one of the major inherent limitation. Very important MCQ can be there on this ground. Sampling, which is one of the major inherent limitations. Sampling is one of the major inherent limitations. So sampling, nature of audit procedures. Third one, timeliness and balance between benefit and cost. And the last one, other matters, where you will be getting the fraud related body transaction, going concern, assumptions. Are you guys getting my point? Clear with this? And RPT. Okay, so this is how it works, and because of this inherent limitation, there is always the detection risk involved in the auditor's work. So since detection risk is there, audit risk is made up of the detection risk. Auditor will tell that it is not possible that every auditor, it is not possible that every material misstatement either due to fraud or error will be identified or will be detected by the auditor. I hope you guys are clear with this. The next point, which is very important, is that even if auditor can take the basis of inherent limitation, but he cannot actually take a complete basis of that. He need to prove whatever he has performed the audit that is in accordance with the standards on auditing and the legal and regulatory requirements. So now how he'll be able to prove? So that proved that basis would be nothing but the audit documentation, and that's where if the auditor has maintained the proper audit documentation, particular audit documentation in accordance with SA 230, then in that scenario auditor will be able to prove his work based upon audit documentation, and that's where the purpose of one of the major purpose of this audit documentation comes into picture. I hope you guys are absolutely clear. So what is the objective and nature? Two objective evidence points. Very first, evidence for the basis for conclusion, and second, to prove that audit was planned and performed in accordance with the standards on auditing and other legal regulatory requirement. What are the purposes of the audit documentation? Very basic point: to plan and perform, to direct and supervise. I'll be just quickly running up this from this point. To plan and perform, after that to direct and supervise, and to discharge the review responsibilities by what? Manager of the audit, engagement manager. After that, enabling the engagement team to be accountable. Whatever the work has been performed, that will be accountability will be assigned to each and every engagement team member based upon the audit documentation. It will be able to be identifiable. After that, useful for the future audit as a reference. After that, for quality control reviews, EQCR, engagement quality control review, and as per SQC1, inspections as per SQC1. So inspection can be internal as well as external. External inspection example would be peer review by ICAI. Okay, after that, for external inspection like peer review as per legal and regulatory requirements. Are you guys clear with this? Very simple. You have to remember these particular points, guys. Come on. Purposes of the audit documentation. I hope you guys are absolutely clear. Now, very important thing would be how the auditor should prepare the audit documentation. So what should be the form, content and extent? Form is what? How it should be written, oral, it can be any form, but most preferable is what? Your written form, visible, documentary form. Okay, so documentary, it is very important one, and it is easy to prove based upon documentary. Content, what should be covered in the audit documentation? So everything, very simply, everything, whatever you are performing in audit as an audit procedure, whatever you are using the audit evidence to perform the audit procedure and to conclude on the audit procedure, and whatever your conclusions have been reached, entirely, that is nothing but what your entire documentation, entire coverage of that particular in your audit file, that is what your audit documentation. So that all things will be the content of your audit documentation. And extent means this, they want to say that how much you should maintain the audit documentation. So obviously there will be a lot of factors which will be determining the extent of audit documentation. So if I am saying that the risk of material misstatement for this particular account balance is higher, then obviously I should be maintaining the extent would be the higher in case of that audit documentation as compared to what such other account balance or class of transaction where the risk is lower. Are you guys getting my point? So how the risk of material misstatement, what is the level of that, your assessment, what are the other factors, nature of industry, nature of company, operations of the entity, control environment, lot of other factors you have to consider in order to determine the extent of audit documentation. We'll come to that particular point later on as well. Okay, so auditor shall prepare audit documentation that is sufficient to enable an experienced auditor having no previous connection with an audit to understand. Very important. So they are saying simply your audit documentation should be that much enough. If anybody experienced auditor comes and review your file, he should be able to understand each and everything from your audit documentation, audit file, who do not have any connection with the audit or who do not have any connection with that respective audit company or audit. Are you getting my point? So that should be the level of your audit documentation. This is the simple thing. So in this audit documentation, what should be the things that would be able to be understood by such a particular personnel? Very first, the nature, timing and extent of audit procedure, whatever you have performed as an auditor. So in that scenario, characteristics, who performed that work, what was the date of work performance, who reviewed that work, date and extent of such a review. The next thing, what was the results of your audit procedure, what you achieved from this particular performance of audit procedure, and what were the audit evidences you obtained as an auditor to perform that respective audit procedure while performing that audit procedure and to arrive at the conclusion over that procedure. Then the third thing would be significant matters that arise during the audit and the conclusions reached over that. Significant matters and the conclusions reached thereon, along with the significant professional judgments made in reaching that particular conclusions. If the auditor identified information that is inconsistent with the auditor's final conclusion, very important. If the auditor identified information that is inconsistent with the final conclusion regarding the significant matter, the auditor shall document how the auditor addressed that inconsistency. Very important. And the next thing, you also have to document the discussions of the significant matters with the management TCWG. So with TCWG, will be discussing all the matters that where you find the significant deficiency or significant inconsistency. That is where as per SA 260, 265. I hope you guys are absolutely clear. So you have to document in such a way that that external experienced auditor will be able to understand, having no previous connection with the audit company or auditor, to understand all these particular points. I hope you guys are clear. Very easy. Very easy. Okay. So now the next thing. This I would not cover. What is the form, content and extent? That depends upon a lot of factors. Size, complexity of entity, nature of planned audit procedure, ROMM level, significance of audit evidence, how much important that audit evidence it is, nature and extent of exceptions, identified exceptions, what it should be, what it is actual, in difference between that, audit methodology and the tools used and needed to document. This last point is very important to understand. Needed to document the conclusion not readily determinable based on the documentation of the audit procedures performed and evidence obtained. So whatever the audit procedures you have performed and the evidence obtained, wherever you were not able to reach out to the conclusion, so how much it is important to document this particular instance of unable to reaching up to conclusion. That importance level is going to determine your nature, timing, form, content and extent of audit documentation. I hope you guys are clear. Very important thing. Then what shall be included in the audit documentation? Your audit program, everything. I would say everything, paper or electronic form, doesn't matter. Audit program, analysis, memos, summaries of significant matters, confirmations, SA 505, management letter of representation 580, checklist, correspondence, that is what communications. Okay. Next, Auditor need not include in the audit documentation superseded drafts of working papers, and that's where you can relate this particular point to the SQC1 requirement with respect to assembly of final audit file. Well, assembly of final audit file, you have certain opportunity to actually discard the perform the administrative nature of work, and then in this administrative nature of work you can perform up to maximum of 60 days from the date of audit report. So now in this administrative nature of changes, you can do one more important thing. That example would be this one: discarding and deleting the superseded work paper. Superseded means what? Whatever it was required beyond that requirement, whatever extra you have performed which is not required over the normal required things performed by you. Okay, so that superseded drafts of working papers you will be actually discarding, deleting. So why to perform that particular thing? And that's where they are saying audit documentation need not to include. Very important thing, they are just saying need not include. Jarurat nahi hai sab, need not include. Still, if auditor wants, he can maintain. Yes, absolutely he can maintain. But very important thing, once he maintains and the period of that assembly is over according to firm's policy, or a maximum 60 days, whichever is earlier. So in that scenario, what shall happen, guys? Come on. In that scenario, you have to maintain. You cannot change that particular documentation for next 7 years. Are you guys getting my point? For 7 years from the date of auditor's report. I hope you guys are clear. What is audit file? Audit file is very important. Audit file is nothing but what? It is a folder or storage media where you have maintained all the audit documentation. So it is one or more folders or storage media in physical or electronic form containing the record that comprise the auditor documentation for the specific audit engagement. Clear with this? Very important question for your examination. Please mark this one as the revision one. What is auditor file? What is the relationship between the audit documentation and audit file? Very first thing, audit file is defined as one or more folders, whatever the definition we just covered. The auditor shall assemble the audit documentation in an audit file and complete the administrative process of assembly of final audit file on a timely basis after the date of auditor's report. So it is very easy. Audit file is made up of audit documentation, nothing else. Okay, assembly of final audit file, SQC1, as just discussed now. As per SQC1, guys, please understand, SQC1 talks about quality control principles, policies at firm level. SA 220 talks about quality control principles and policies at engagement level. Clear? So as per SQC1, the firm should have, firm should establish the policies and procedures for the timely completion of assembly. So the assembly process should be timely completed, and there should be the firm policy. There should be the policies and procedures of the firm for this timely completion of assembly of audit file. And they are saying, SQC1 is saying that whatever the firm policy procedure it will be, so there might be possibility that firm might have the policy of maintaining assembly of and completion of the assembly process within 15 days from the date of auditor's report. Absolutely fine, no issues. But if the firm wants to set this particular policy procedure, they cannot have this particular time limit of more than 60 days. So they are giving the maximum limit of 60 days, and it should not be more than 60 days from the date of auditor's report. So 60 days limit has been given by SQC1. Can firm have the lower than this particular 60 days limit? Yes, absolutely. In such case, where the firm have the lower limit of completion of assembly process, let's say for 30 days, 45 days, 15 days, in that scenario, what shall be applicable, whether that particular limit or a 60 days? Obviously, the limit as would have been set by that particular firm policy procedure. Okay, and that will be the final limit. 60 days is just for the purpose of setting up by the firm's policy procedure. Firm cannot set more than 60 days period for the purpose of completion of file assembly as per SQC1. So that's what they are saying. An ordinary period for the completion is ordinarily not more than 60 days after the date of auditor's report. I hope you guys are clear. And during these 60 days as well, the auditor shall be able to change only administrative nature of changes in the audit documentation. And what are the examples of that? One example we just covered before some time: deleting or discarding the superseded documentation. Second one, sorting, collating, cross-referencing of audit working papers. Third one, signing of the completion checklist. Please understand, with respect to file assembly, we will not be able to sign off or complete the checklist for the other audit procedure, like let's say checklist for the accounting standard, checklist for the standards on auditing, checklist for the compliance of Companies Act 2013. No. Checklist of the Ind AS. No. We will not be able to complete this particular checklist during this 60 days period. You will be able to sign off and complete the checklist only with respect to the file assembly and not anything else, because that other checklist are nothing but a part of your audit procedure, and you cannot perform any audit procedure in this particular 60 days period. Only administrative nature of changes are allowed. And the last thing, very important, If you have performed certain audit procedure before the date of auditor's report, but you could not document that particular procedures and whatever your observations were while performing that procedure, you just performed in the draft level, but because you didn't have, let's say, time, that sufficient time, and you had the deadline of submitting the audit report to the management. So in that scenario, what you should do? In that scenario, please complete your work, perform the audit procedure in draft level and discuss with your particular engagement team members before the date of auditor's report. So your work should have been completed before the auditor report dates. Your discussion with the engagement team member should have been completed before the date of auditor's report. Now the only point is about the documentation is chakachak karna work paper. So only point of documentation of such particular workings which you have performed and discussed with the engagement team members before the date of auditor's report, you can do this in these 60 days. Very important. Documenting audit evidence which was discussed with the engagement team before the date of auditor's report. Very, very important. Now, once you have completed the assembly of final audit file, after that, up to the date of completion of 7 years from the date of auditor's report. So please understand, that is what the retention period it will be. So let's say if I am saying this is the auditor's report date, now these are the 60 days, let's say, and firm policy is also of 60 days only. So now during this particular period, we want to say that this is the completion of 7 years. 7 years from what? Auditor's report date. But during this particular period, now 7 years minus 60 days, during this particular period, you cannot make any changes to that particular auditor documentation file. Please understand, this 60 days would be starting from auditor's report, 7 years also would be starting from auditor's report. Clear with this? 7 years are not after the date of 60 days. 7 years are not after assembly. 7 years are from what? Your auditor's report date. Very important. So after the assembly of final audit file has been completed, the auditor shall, after the assembly of final audit file has been completed, the auditor shall not delete or discard the audit documentation before the end of its retention period, and retention period would be of not shorter than the 7 years from the date of auditor's report or the date of group audit report, whichever is later. Okay, as per SQC 1. I hope you guys are clear. Okay, so now next one important thing. What are the significant matters? Please understand, we are talking about the significant matters now. Are you getting my point? Whoever is online, please let me know in chat box. If you are not able to respond, then I am not able to continue with the sessions or the marathon revisions hereafter. Okay, if I am doing this, then obviously you should be able to benefit that. You should be able to get benefit of that. And if you are not getting benefit, then it doesn't make sense for me to continue with this particular marathon revisions. If you have any queries, if you have anything to say, please communicate with me. We'll be discussing over that thing. Okay, I hope you guys are getting my point. Okay, if you want in recorded form only, I'll be recording that. I'll not be taking live. I'm taking live just for your purpose. Okay, clear with this? And my speed is not that much slow right now in marathon revisions, where you would be finding any difficulty with respect to the speed where you want a recorded one. So recorded and live should be the same with respect to the speed here right now. Okay, fine. I hope you guys are clear. If anybody is watching the recorded one, should be clear with this and should be able to attend the live lecture if I take even after that. But I want your response. If you gives me response, then I'll be able to continue with this. That's so simple. Okay, let's discuss next one. Documentation of significant matters and related significant professional judgments. So now what are the significant matters? Very, very important. Examples of significant matters. Very simple. These are such matters which give rise to the significant risk, nothing else. Wherever you find certain matter, you believe that this matter is going to give rise to the significant risk in this particular relation, obviously you can say that that is the significant matter. And now that significant matter you have to consider accordingly separately for the purpose of audit. So that's what they are saying. So now how we will be able to identify such significant risk matters? Are you getting my point? That is depend upon very first thing. Results of audit procedures indicating the financial statements could be materially misstated. Any matter which is providing such results that where you are finding that this would be impacting the financial statement materially misstated. So in that scenario, that is what your significant matter, because it is giving rise to significant risk. Second thing, a need to revise the auditor's previous assessment of ROMM and the auditor's responses to those risks. any matter you identified while performing the audit, and while performing that particular audit you came to know that, sir, this is such a matter, now previously I identified this risks should have been the lower risk or the higher risk. Now I feel that after understanding this particular matter, now after performing the audit work on this particular matter, I believe that this risk should have been more than what I have already assessed. So if you have assessed the lower risk, now you believe that it should be either higher or significant, then you go back to your risk assessment procedure, audit planning documentation, and you change your audit planning, you revise your risk assessment level. Now whenever you find such a need to revise your risk assessment level of previously determined while audit planning, then in that scenario you find that particular matter giving rise to the significant risk or the significant matter, and that is how, guys, you will be able to identify these particular matters. Second thing, any circumstances that cause the auditor significant difficulty in applying the necessary audit procedure. For example, COVID-19, so March 20, auditor was not able to perform the physical verification of inventory because there was the nationwide lockdown applied by the central government from 25th of March only, and many auditors actually determine 31st March date to be the physical verification, and it is so normal, it is so common that on 31st March we will be performing physical verification. But the circumstance arised, which was very common circumstance for everybody in this country, to perform the physical verification of inventory. Now in that scenario, what shall happen? In that scenario, you find that this is the circumstance which is providing us, which is arising a significant difficulty in performing the respective audit procedure, and we cannot actually skip this particular audit procedure because it relates to the existence of the existence of the inventory, which is ultimately a very important account balance in the financial statements. So since if we are facing any difficulty and due to certain circumstances, then we call it matter to be the significant matter for that respective audit. Now next thing, findings that could result in a modification to the audit opinion or the inclusion of an emphasis of matter para in the auditor's report. When they are saying you are getting any observation which results into the modification of opinion, so it is so material, it is so important, it is so significant that the result of that particular, the impact of that particular observation would be nothing but the modified opinion. Or if it is not a modified opinion, but you find it necessary to include the emphasis of matter paragraph in the auditor's report because of that particular matter, then you find that particular matter to be the significant one. Okay, I hope you guys are clear. Very important for examination. Please mark this one as the BER. Very important. Next one. An important factor in determining the form, content, extent of audit documentation of significant matters is the extent of professional judgment exercise. How much professional judgment you exercise, that is how it is going to determine. Okay. This is the important for the review of audit engagement by the senior AQCR. Okay, that is fine, very normal. What is the completion memo and audit documentation summary? It is nothing but what two things: summary of significant matters, whatever you have observed, identified during the audit, and the second thing, how you address that particular significant matters in the course of audit. That is how you are going to describe and summarize in one document. That document is known as nothing but completion memo or summary audit memorandum or audit documentation summary. This is very important point, guys. Please understand, this is the BER point. I have already given this and we had a lot of discussions while our regular course on this point. You might get this particular question: what are the circumstances in which it is appropriate to prepare the audit documentation relating to use of professional judgment, which include where the matters and judgments are significant. So matters and judgments are significant matters, significant judgment, and you are using the professional judgment. So how you will be preparing that audit documentation, and what are the circumstances which will arise this particular preparation of the audit documentation for the significant matters and significant judgments. That is what the question is. So the circumstance would be like where the rationale for the auditor's conclusion, when a requirement provides that certain information or factors at their consideration is significant in the context of particular engagement. Very simple. Wherever the rationale is providing for the auditor's conclusion, whatever the auditor is concluding, and the rationale, the basis of that conclusion is providing such a matter or providing certain information or certain indicating certain factors which need to be considered as the significantly, and such significant consideration would be indicating that this is what an important thing where we are using the professional judgment and we need to prepare the audit documentation for this. The second thing, the basis for auditor's conclusion over the reasonableness of areas of subjective judgment. So wherever the auditor has the subjective judgment, so for example, provision for gratuity, provision for employee benefits, I would say, or with respect to the cash flows projections, forecasting of cash flows in terms of going concern assumption testing. So in that scenario, there would be the areas of what this subjective judgments. So now whenever you are performing the audit of such areas of subjective judgments, you need to check the reasonability of that particular assumptions, whatever have been used while performance of that particular significant while making that particular subjective judgments. Clear with this? So now, while testing that reasonableness, what is your conclusion on that reasonableness, and the basis for that conclusion is what would be the circumstance that would tell us to prepare the audit documentation with respect to that judgment. Next one, the basis for the auditor's conclusions about the authenticity of document when further investigation is undertaken in response to the conditions identified which may not be authentic. Or they are saying whenever you perform audit and you find certain conditions not authentic on the documents or the audit evidence, and you undertake certain particular investigation because of that, and now during that particular investigation you have the doubt over the authenticity of document, now in such scenario whatever shall be the basis for your audit conclusions, that is what a very important indicator or circumstance where you need to prepare a documentation of your auditor's judgment. Clear with this? So these are the things, please mark this one as very important. I have already written it down as the BER point. So please, it is very important for your examination. Okay. So this was all about the audit documentation, and the last one is about the audit documentation as per SQC when it is the property of what the auditor. An auditor may provide that at his discretion to what auditor may make it the portion and may make extract available to the client. But very important thing that usually student miss is that there are certain conditions for this particular scenario. What are the conditions? Very first, that such a disclosure shall not undermine the validity of work performed or the independence of the auditor. And the second one is independence. So ideally the work validity should not be undermined. Undermined means lowered. Okay. So validity of work should not be undermined, and the second, it should not undermine the effect of independence of audit partner or engagement team personnel. Okay, if these two conditions are satisfied, obviously auditor at his discretion can make available the work papers to the client. I hope you guys are absolutely clear. Next one, audit evidence. What is audit evidence? SA 500 discuss about this. So it is very easy that it is the information used by the auditor to arrive at the conclusions, based on which the audit opinion is. On which the auditor's opinion is based. So 3 points again. 3 points. It is such information which is used by the auditor to arrive at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based. Clear with this? Audit evidence as per SA 500. So please remember SA 500 discuss about this particular scenario, this particular concept. It includes both accounting records as well as the other information. So accounting records, you know the examples like general ledger extracts, invoices, contracts, order copies, confirmations, everything. Sorry, computations. After that, computations, not confirmations. Confirmations is the external one. Okay, other information. Other information includes your minutes of meetings, external confirmations, manuals, etc. Okay. So now, very important thing. In some cases, this could be the important one for your examination. Mark this one as the revision one. In some cases, the absence of information, that is management's refusal to provide the requested representation, is used by the auditor and also constitutes an audit evidence. Sometimes if you don't have any audit evidence, there is an absence of audit evidence, management is not providing you the audit evidence, in that scenario, that particular situation could also be acting as the audit evidence in your audit because the information is not available. So absence of information may also constitute as the audit evidence in such scenario. Okay. So what is your objective examination? What is the meaning of objective examination? That is there, not important from your examination perspective, it's just meaning perspective. It is nothing but critical examination and scrutiny of what, where you assess how for the statements present the actual state of affairs and give the true and fair view. That is what your objective examination. What is the relationship between the audit evidence and opinion of the auditor? Very easy. That the auditor obtains audit evidence, and with the help of that audit evidence, auditor forms the audit opinion on the financial statements. Very easy. What are the types of audit evidence? Very easy, sir. Nature and source. Based upon nature, there are three types: visual, oral, documentary. Which is more reliable? Obviously documentary. Sir, source. Based upon source, there could be the internal, there could be the external audit evidence. Which is more reliable? External. So the documentary and external are the more reliable audit evidences. Now the very important part for the examination, that is sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. In this point, we identify basically the two things: sufficiency and appropriateness. Sufficiency is nothing but what your quantitative measure of audit evidence will depend upon three factors. The examination could have been on this particular ground. There was a question probably in Jan 21 on this concept, Jan 21 or November 20 somehow in one examination. What are the factors that determine the sufficiency of audit evidence? Very first, it is the quantitative measure, and three factors are determinable. Very first, it is the materiality. Second, it is the ROMM level, that is risk of material misstatement level, and the last one, size and characteristics of the population. So if your materiality is higher, obviously the sufficiency would be higher or lower? That it would be lower. So there is inverse relationship between the materiality and the sufficiency. Inverse relationship. Please understand. ROMM level. Sir, if the ROMM level is higher, the sufficiency would be higher. ROMM level lower, sufficiency would be lower. So there is the direct relationship between the whatever ROMM level and the sufficiency. And size and characteristics of populations are again the direct relationship. Size higher, sufficiency higher; size lower, sufficiency lower. That's it. Quantity lower. Next point, ROMM level we already know. There are 2 points: inherent risk, control risk. Inherent risk is the susceptibility to the assertion to the material misstatement, that could be material misstatement, before consideration of related controls. This is very important, and once you consider the control, you again doubt that particular controls, because there could be a scenario that control will not be able to prevent, detect and correct the material misstatement that exists in the financial statements, and that would be nothing but your control risk. Okay. So now after considering these two risk part, inherent risk and control risk, you arrive at the combined assessment of what your risk of material misstatement in accordance with SA 315. And now very important thing, what is the appropriateness? So first one, sufficiency is okay, done. Based upon three factors, we identified whether this is sufficient or not, that's it. Now determine the appropriateness of audit evidence. How the appropriateness will be determined? 2 points, relevance and reliability. Relevance is a matter of professional judgment. Reliability depends upon two things: source data and nature. You need to test the completeness and accuracy of the source data. If the source data is complete, okay, no issue. Accuracy, no issue. Okay, that's it. So my completeness and accuracy has been done, tested. Operating effectiveness of controls with respect to completeness, accuracy tested. That's it. Your source data is reliable. Next one, nature of audit evidence, and go back to that particular thing. Nature and source. Nature is documentary, more reliable, no issues. External audit evidence, no issues, more reliable. Now once you are done with the reliability testing, you will check whether that is relevant. Yes, if it is relevant, then okay, relevant is there, reliability is there, okay, that's it. You have the appropriate audit evidence. Now if you have the sufficient such appropriate audit evidence, if you have the sufficient appropriate audit evidence, sufficiency means you have such a quantity of appropriate audit evidence which is sufficient, then you arrive at the conclusion that this audit evidence is sufficient and appropriate for the purpose of arriving at the conclusion. And now according to SA 330, you will be able to conclude based upon that particular audit evidences which are sufficient and appropriate to arrive at the conclusion in audit opinion. Are you guys clear with this? Easy, very much clear, very easy, perfect. So there are 2 parts: sufficiency, appropriateness. Quantitative, 3 factors would be determining the sufficiency: materiality, ROMM level, and third one, size and characteristics of population. Appropriateness determined by the 2 factors, relevance and reliability. Relevance is a matter of professional judgment. Reliability depends upon the source data and nature. Source data, auditor would be testing the completeness and accuracy, while the nature of audit evidence, we need to check out whether that is visual, oral or documentary. If it is documentary, more reliable, obviously. Next point, source, whether that is the external or internal. External, more reliable. Now again going to the depth of external, whether that is related party, non-related party. If it is non-related party, more reliable as compared to what? A related party external. Clear with this? I hope you guys are absolutely clear. Now next one. Way information to be used as an audit evidence has been prepared using the work of the management expert. Guys, please understand, management expert we are talking about. The auditor shall, to the extent necessary, having regard to the significance of that expert's work for the audit purpose, have to consider three things. Very first, consider the competence, capability and objectivity of that expert. After that, understand the work of that particular expert. Third thing, appropriateness of that expert's works as an audit evidence for the relevant assertion. You need to test these particular three things while concluding on the use of that particular matters where the management expert work has been used. I hope you guys are absolutely clear. Very much clear with this. Okay. So mark this one as the revision one. Important. I hope you guys are clear. Do you have any queries? I'll be just taking a break of 10-20 seconds. Please let me know if you have any queries over this. Please tell me if you have any queries over this. Very easy, no issues. There are a lot of things, guys. Come on. Okay. Now the next thing. When the auditor is using any information that has been produced by entity, so whatever the information you will be obtaining from the management, you have to test the two things of that. Very first thing, completeness, and second thing, accuracy. Very first thing, completeness and accuracy of that particular information, and the second thing, whether that information is precise and detailed for the purpose of audit. Okay, so this is very important thing. Now, as per SA 330, we have covered this 2-3 times before as well. That 330 requires the auditor to conclude on the whether the sufficient appropriate audit evidence has been obtained or not, because without sufficient appropriate audit evidence, the auditor cannot conclude on any audit procedure. Now next one, when the reliability of audit evidence is increasing, very easy. If it is obtained from independent, reliability will increase. If the controls related to that are effective, reliability increases. If it is obtained directly by the auditor, then reliability increases. If it is in documentary form, original documents, reliability increases. And the last thing, if the corroborative audit evidence obtained, then reliability would increase. Corroborative means what? Any other supporting audit evidence, okay, for the primary audit evidence. Easy one. What they are saying, look at this. The auditor may gain increased assurance when the audit evidence obtained from different sources of a different nature is consistent. Very easy. Where they are saying where you are obtaining audit evidences from different sources, but you arrive at the conclusion which is ultimately the same, your assurance will obviously going to increase because of that. Conversely, when audit evidence obtained from the one source is inconsistent with the obtained from another, then obviously the alternative additional audit procedure you need to perform in order to increase the audit assurance. Okay. If there is any inconsistency or doubt over the reliability of audit evidence, then what shall be the auditor's duty? Auditor then determine that what the modifications and additions to the audit procedures are required. Then consider the effect of that particular matter on the other aspects of the audit as well, and do the according changes in your audit. The next one is about the auditor procedures to obtain the audit evidence. Please understand, very important. What are the auditor procedures that would be performed by the auditor? So I'll be actually writing it down for all of you. So audit procedures. Firstly, it will be the risk assessment procedure. Second type, further audit procedure. Two types of audit procedure: risk assessment procedure, further audit procedure. Risk assessment procedure have the basis of SA 315, where you have to identify the risk and assess the risk. And based on your identification and assessment of the risk, you would be providing the responses to the identified and assessed risk in SA 330. Where you will be planning the further audit procedure. Clear with this? Okay. So 330 would include your responses, and these responses would be nothing but determination of the further audit procedure. Now, in further audit procedure, you would be determining the basically two types of audit procedure. Very first, it would be the test of controls. Next, it would be the substantive audit procedure. Test of controls is very easy. It is nothing but what? Performing the testing of controls, internal control system of the entity for relevant risk identified by you, which is important for the and which is impacting directly on the financial statement. So internal financial controls you are going to test. What you are going to test? The controls of that. What are the things that you will be testing of that controls? That would you be tested by design, implementation, maintenance, plus operating effectiveness. So we call it as what? DIM of IC plus OE. DIM of IC plus OE. DIM of IC, internal controls plus operating effectiveness. I hope you guys are clear. Next one, in substantive audit procedure, we will be performing two types of substantive procedures. One, it is test of details, and another one, it is analytical procedure. So analytical procedure is dealt by SA 520, where we talk about that this is nothing but study of plausible relationship between the financial and non-financial information. But while test of details, we again call it as what? Your WAC of AD shortcut. What is WAC of AD? V is validity, A is accuracy, and C is the completeness of the accounting data. Clear? Of accounting data. Clear with this? And analytical procedure SA 520, it would be there. Study of plausible relationship between what? Study of plausible relationship. I am deliberately writing it down. Don't look at my handwriting. Study of plausible relationship between both financial and non-financial information. There is one question in MCQ or correct or incorrect in one of the RTP, MTP somewhere about this particular thing. Both the financial and non-financial information. Okay, not only financial, not only non-financial, both the financial, non-financial. Okay, next one. Now, while actually performing all these risk assessment procedures and further audit procedure, what are the things you will be performing to obtain the audit evidence? So all these audit evidence procedures you will be performing by using certain activities, and those activities are this one. First one, it is inquiry. Inquiry is discussion with the management. Second one is the inspection. Inspection is the examination of documentary audit evidences or the evidences. Inspection, inquiry, inspection, observation, example, physical verification. After that, external confirmation, SA 505, external confirmation, SA 505, third party confirmations. After that, recalculation, checking of arithmetical accuracy. Reperformance, performing the entire activity of control which has been already performed by the management in order to test the relevant assertion. And the last one is of the analytical procedure. Analytical procedure SA 520. Clear? So these are what all the procedures that you will be performing in order to obtain the audit evidence while performing risk assessment procedure and the further audit procedure. I hope you guys are absolutely clear with this. Now, out of this, there could be another one more question. So, we have these 7 types of procedures in order to obtain the audit evidence, which will be providing us the most effective and most efficient audit evidence. Most effective and most efficient. So, if there is any single procedure which will be providing both the most effective and most efficient audit evidence, no sahab, we don't have any single audit procedure which will be providing both effective as well as efficient audit evidences. We should be having the certain combination of audit procedure. There would be the combination of audit procedure which would be providing us this one. So, if we look at individual procedures, inquiry will be most efficient but not that much effective. Inspection would be most effective but not will be the efficient. Observations would be the again efficient but not the effective one. External confirmation effective would be there. Recalculation, but it will not be the efficient one. Recalculation, again it would be time consuming, so moderately effective, moderately efficient, not that much efficient. Reperformance would be the most effective audit evidence. Reperformance would provide the most effective audit evidence, more than your inspection as well. Most effective. Okay, there can be the question on this particular ground, MCQ or correct or incorrect. So please understand, most effective audit evidence is provided by reperformance. Most efficient audit evidence is provided by inquiry. Most efficient. Okay. Next one, analytical procedure again would be the effective and but not would be that much efficient. Okay. So now if we conclude on this ground, we are not able to find out a particular combination for this, and that's why they are talking about this combination will be the nothing but the matter of professional judgment. Matter of professional judgment. You have to look at lot of factors, the nature of entity, understanding of the entity, their in control environment, and lot of other things, and based on that you will be determining which combination is suitable that would provide us the most effective and most efficient audit evidence in that respective scenario. But generally combination of inquiry and inspection will provide you the most effective, most efficient audit evidence. Okay. So please look at this very important question for your examination. This entire slide is, this entire page is very, very important, whatever we have written down here. Are you guys clear? You will find this particular thing in chapter 6 as well. There you will find this particular point. But guys, it is very important and common for everything. Okay. Not just automated environment. Okay, so whatever we have discussed, that is covered over here. Examples: inquiry, inspection, observation, confirmation, recalculation. The next page, it is reperformance and then analytical procedure. RAP, risk assessment procedures are the procedures that are performed to understand the entity environment, including the internal controls, to identify and assess ROMM in accordance with what your SA 315. Okay. Most of the auditors' work in forming the auditor's opinion consists of obtaining and evaluating audit evidence. This is your RTP question. Please prepare it very, very well in our question bank. It is already there. Okay. Now next one. Test of controls. You have to actually explain this particular statement. Why most of the time you will be just obtaining and evaluating the audit evidence, because everything from start to end is nothing but a part of your audit evidence. And what are the audit evidence? All that things you need to explain over there. What are the test of controls? We have already discussed. It is nothing but the testing of the design, implementation, maintenance of internal controls, and testing the operating effectiveness of those. Now, what are the questions that you will be asking in order to test the test of controls? All the WS type questions. What is the control procedure? Who performs that control? Who reviews that control? Now, whether that performer and reviewer are competent and authorized to perform that activity and review that activity. When the control is being performed. Frequency and consistency. Please understand, when is nothing but providing us a triggering activity which actually indicates that control performance time. But frequency is like what is the periodicity of performance of that control. So it could be from many times a day or daily or weekly or per monthly or quarterly or half yearly, or we can say even annually. Consistency, how much it is consistent, and then expected rate of deviation, how much rate of deviation is expected from a control, and threshold, if there is any threshold up to which the management will neglect what is the deviation level. Now, when auditor has to determine how much testing we need to perform with respect to controls, how much, so that is what your extent of test of controls. Important question, please mark this as BER. You have to revise this before exam. So, before exam revision question, what are the factors that would be considered by the auditor while determining the extent of test of controls? Very first, what is the frequency of that control? What is the periodicity of control performance? What is the length of time during the audit period that the auditor is relying on the operating effectiveness? After that, expected rate of deviation. This is SA 330 question. So, please understand, very, very important for examination. Expected rate of deviation, relevance and reliability of audit evidence to be obtained, and after that the extent to which the audit evidence related to the assertion. Okay, are you guys clear? So this is 330. Now new course students will tell me that sir, 330 is not applicable for a new course. Then why you are teaching us that and why it is included in our notes? So please check out your chapter number 3 and you will find all these points of 330 already incorporated in your chapter. So even if ICI is talking about that, say 330 is not applicable to you, as a standard, it is already included majority level in your curriculum. So please be prepared with that, very, very important for examination. Okay, I hope you guys are absolutely clear. The same point, next one is about the 330, again included in your curriculum and again applicable for the examination. Using the audit evidence, I have taught these particular points twice in chapter number 3 as well as while covering 330 separately in my last chapter of my notes, which I have added deliberately manually in my notes. Chapter number 14, I would say, that includes all the miscellaneous standards and all that things, and I have covered 330 again and again these particular points in that. Okay, so these are very, very important. So please understand the importance of these particular points, very, very important. Okay, so now whenever you obtain certain audit evidences in the previous year while performing operating effectiveness of controls, whether you should rely and use that particular audit evidences only rather than obtaining the new one. So very important, auditor has to consider certain factors while determining this, whether the effectiveness of controls, other elements of the controls are there or not. If the other elements of the internal control are effective, no issues, you can consider for that particular thing subject to other factors consideration. Next one, what is the risk of that particular control related to that particular risk, means what is the risk level of that control, characteristics of that control, whether that is the manual or automated. Obviously if it is manual, majorly you will be obtaining the new audit evidence and you will not be relying on the previous year audit evidence. But if it is automated, then obviously you can consider one step ahead for consideration of the previous year audit evidence subject to other factors. Again, what is the effectiveness of general IT controls? If the general IT control GITC are effective, then okay, you can also consider for that. Then effectiveness of the controls and application by the entity. If there has been any deviations during the previous year which you identified, if there are any personal changes during the year which perform that particular control or review that particular control, if there is any lack of change in a particular control, poses a risk due to changing environment, changing circumstances. And the last one, risk of material misstatement and the extent of reliance you have to consider. Based on all these 6 factors, you are going to determine whether to use the previous year audit evidence obtained while performance of what? Operating effectiveness of controls. So mark this one as again the important one for your examination. Okay, very, very important. Again the 330 question, I told you, BER, very important. What are the specific inquiries by the auditor when deviations from controls are detected? What are the specific inquiries? If the deviations have been detected, then auditor shall make specific inquiries and determine, very first thing, whether this test of controls has been provide an appropriate basis for reliance on controls. If we need to perform the additional test of controls are necessary or not. And the third thing, what are the potential risk of material misstatement that need to be addressed while performing substantive procedures. So whether to increase the extent of substantive testing or not. So these are the 3 things. TOC, whether that is the providing appropriate basis for reliance on controls, additional TOC required or not. And the third thing, potential risk of misstatement that need to be addressed using substantive testing. Okay. In substantive, we have covered that TOD would be there and substantive analytical procedure. TOD is nothing but VAC of AD, validity, accuracy, completeness, which is nothing but what your vouching and verification. Okay. So I hope you guys are absolutely clear. Now I think that the remaining part of this particular chapter I would be covering during the next lecture tomorrow. Okay, where we would be revising this particular part and we will start off with the essay 500 other series as well. Very, very important chapter, a big chapter. Will not be able to cover this particular chapter within an hour, obviously. So we will cover the remaining part of the chapter in tomorrow's session, tomorrow's marathon revision series, where you would be getting a boost of what 1 hour lecture every day, and you will be able to cover a lot of chunk of your part, basically syllabus part, in very few time. Okay. And you will not understand when the syllabus would be completed. You will be so confident with this particular thing. So I believe that this should have been very important for all of you. If you are watching this recorded one, please take care of these particular points, whatever we have discussed during the lectures. If you have any queries, you can reach out to me. And if you want anything to know about this particular subject or anything related to whatever is available with me to support you at my best for the performance of for your performance in examination, I would be definitely able to answer to all of you. So you can reach out to me personally on my number that is blinking in the footer of this particular video. So you can check it out, guys. Take care of yourself. Please be confident, positive, study very, very well. Please, this is the time where you have to study hard and you have to give your best. Okay, let's meet in tomorrow's session with the next part of this particular chapter. Take care of yourself. Have a nice day. Have a good night. Bye bye.